it was a rainy morning on the humid island of Kyushu when an unusual meeting took place. Otomo Sorin, a daimyo, a powerful feudal lord, met with a dark-clothed priest from Europe. The priest was one of the founders of the Jesuit Order and future Saint Francis Xavier. He had arrived there only 2 years earlier, in 1549, with a few companions to start the new mission. Xavier's strong personality, pious habits, and excellent rhetorical skills inspired Sorin. He decided to become Christian and was gladly baptized. 3 decades later, despite the troubled political situation, he kept his faith and even sent some of his best young aristocrats to Europe. The voyage, known as the Tensho Embassy, was led by a handsome young man of immaculate manners, Ito Mancio. In this period, travel was not easy. The trip from Japan, now 17 exhausting hours, as they say, usually took more than a year, and anything could happen. Strong winds could lead your ship astray, the water supply or disease kill the crew. Ito Mancio was lucky and very well prepared when he left Nagasaki in 1582, and he successfully managed to reach Europe. Portugal was one of the most influential European countries in the Far East at the time, so members of the Tensho Embassy traveled there as well. In the city of Coimbra, they witnessed a fantastic spectacle. Students of the Jesuit College had prepared an extended performance consisting of various plays on Japan. This was probably the first of many times that the land of the rising sun was represented on the European and Jesuit stage. Charles Boxer, a renowned British historian, famously named the missionary presence in the Far East the Christian century of Japan. This is a ground title, but many see it now as exaggerated. After the initial success of Jesuits in the years following Xavier's arrival in 1587, missionary activity was banned in Japan. The instigator of this ban, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, was a powerful lord who ended the period of domestic wars known as Sengoku. In 1597, the most famous execution of 26 martyrs took place. Christianity was completely prohibited in 1614 by the newly established Tokugawa shogunate. This was due to the coinciding political, cultural, and religious circumstances, among them the more severe orthodoxy of other religious orders active on the islands. Overall, European and local fathers converted around 100,000 Japanese men and women, and many of those women became true leaders of their communities. The persecution continued well to the 1630s, and the shogunate brutally tortured and killed Christians who didn't want to renounce their faith. Some had to flee the country, others went underground and gained the name Kakure Kirishtan, which means hidden Christian. So, for the 17th century European, the Dutch excluded, Japan, with its ban on Christianity, was considered a place of glorious martyrdom. A certain Polish Jesuit, Wojciech Męciński, who used the name Albertus Polonius, as his name was too difficult for foreigners, and I imagine some people here can relate to the problem, had but one dream: to die in Japan for Christ. Despite his family dragging him back to Poland from various places because of his financial fortune, he traveled all the way to Nagasaki and was killed there soon after disembarking his ship. The stories about brave young boys dying on the cross with Christ's name on their lips must then have spoken to the Baroque audience, since these Japanese topics, many years after the initial performance in Coimbra, flourished on the Jesuit stages in numerous countries, especially, or at least here we have the most sources, in the German-speaking area. This is exactly the phenomenon we found lying in wait to be researched. Fortunately, the Japanese Science Society and the Austrian FUF agreed with our enthusiastic project proposal. Perhaps we got a little help. The project reviewers might have seen Martin Scorsese's movie Silence, which happened to hit the box office at precisely the time of our application. The project members, Haruka Oba, Akihiko Watanabe, Patrick Schwemmer, Florian Schaffenrad, and I, wanted to learn more about the presence of Japanese topics in Jesuit theater. Our project, Japan on the Jesuit stage, has just ended. Over the last 2 years, we have posed many questions. For instance, were any Japanese characters chosen more frequently than others? Spoiler, they were. Is the Japanese background of the plays detailed? It isn't, and so on. One of the most interesting questions was why Jesuits decided on setting their dramas in Japan, and what the place of these dramas in Jesuit theater as a whole might be. Members of Societas Jesu, the Society of Jesus, who later gained the name Jesuits, are of course associated with counter-reformatory efforts of La Santa Sede. In fact, however, part of their work were overseas missions and the education of youth from its beginnings around 1540. I imagine you can recall seeing the building of former Jesuit colleges, now used for another purpose, since the fathers managed to establish a very dense network of schools all over Europe, and even in such remote places as Goa or Macau. Their system varied according to the place, but it was based on a globally valid document entitled Ratio Studiorum. Jesuit spirituality had been connected with theatrical methods since its founder, Ignatius Loyola. Jesuit schools made use of theater in their educational process. Teachers known as patres horagi were obliged to write and help students perform dramatic pieces. These were designed to enhance their piety by putting the boys in situations where they would be able to share the emotions of a good or bad Christian character. The recommended number of performers in a Jesuit school was 1 a year, but many schools sought out loopholes which would allow to organize them more often, despite some teachers complaining that preparation for a play interrupted lessons. Much like the nativity play rehearsals in my secondary school. But unlike that dreadful nativity play, though, those events were a fantastic PR opportunity for Jesuit schools because they were attended by parents, local nobility, and church officials. Many patres horagi decided to pick some remote, or let's say exotic places, for instance, our favorite, Japan, as setting for their plays. This practice is known as Welttheater, Worldtheater. It seems that the oriental allure of the play helped to focus an audience's attention on the message of piety. This message took pride of place on the stage and served as a good reminder of the worldwide presence and therefore true power of Societas Jesu. Additionally, or maybe even more importantly, by participating in performances, students could practice their Latin. And good apprehension of Latin was the most substantial skill for any educated person of the time. It may come as a surprise, but ancient literature forms only 1% of the existing Latin literature. Another 4% belong to Middle Ages, and the remaining 95% is Neo-Latin. Neo-Latin can be roughly defined as any Latin text produced from the Renaissance till now, and much of that material comes from the 16th and 17th centuries. It might seem bizarre to be addressing this material at the conference on the Polish perspective, but Baroque literature was produced long before the 19th century nationalisms by people of similar educational background who used the common language to describe everything, from the spots on the moon through the Ming Chinese court, and unreciprocated love. It probably wasn't the goal of Welttheater, but one cannot help but notice that Jesuit playwrights transmitted knowledge about Japan, received from missionary reports and biographies of Francis Xavier, to the broader, interested public. They disseminated news on foreign cultures, which was shared in intellectual circles. The play they composed all over Europe are written proof that the intellectual horizons of the era were very broad and common. And this is probably something we may like to think about in our times of lingering intolerance and growing distrust. Thank you.